Good evening. You're listening to Studio 7 from the Voice of America on Tuesday, August 18th, 2015. And this is The Connection on LiveTalk. I'm Tatenda Gumbo.
And I'm Sithandegile Mhlanga.
And tonight on The Connection, we are discussing the lives of young Zimbabweans living in the diaspora.
Let's get connected on Twitter and Facebook using the hashtag The Connection. Our Facebook page is VOA Studio 7 and our Twitter handle is Studio 7 VOA. We can also get things going on WhatsApp and the number is 001-202-465-0318.
And for those of you who want to speak on air, you can give us a call on the number 001-202-619-2077. Again, that number is 001-202-619-2077 and we'll call you back.
We are also streaming live on the internet at voazimbabwe.com, voashona.com, and voandebele.com.
Again, this is the Youth Forum, The Connection, coming to you live from the Voice of America in Washington, D.C. And tonight, as you might have heard or noticed, I am joined by Studio 7's Standekile Mhlanga, who is filling in for my co-host Ntungamili Nkomo. And we are also gladly joined, finally on air, by our intern, Rungano Kaio. Rungano, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Thank you for being with us today.
I'm very happy to be here today.
And of course, as you heard earlier on, we'll be discussing young Zimbabweans living in the diaspora. And as many of you know, there are thousands of young Zimbabweans in many countries, like here in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Asia, Middle East, and right next door in South Africa. So today we want to hear from you young people to let us know how your experience has been living outside of home in the diaspora. Sithandekile.
Yes, siyalamukela kuhlelo lwethu oluphathelane labatsha olwe The Connections. Sithi thina lamuhla sixoxa ngokuphathelane labatsha abahlala ngaphandle kwelizwe eleZimbabwe. Sitsho phela abahlala eGoli khona ngapha eSouth Africa, abaseNgilandi, abaseMelika, abaseNew Zealand, ngaphi kwelizwe. Njengoba sisizwa ukuthi kulezigidi lezigidi zezizalwane zeZimbabwe ezihlala kwamanye amazwe. Ngakho ke usitshayile ucingo nxa ungomunye wabo usitshela ukuthi kuyini khona ngapho kwenzayo, injani impilo, lakho konke nje ofuna ukuthi usichathekele khona.
Manerano mchirongwa che The Connection tichange tichikurukurane vechidiki kuZimbabwe nezveupenyu hwavo vari kunze kwenyika pakugara, kudzidza kana kumabasa munyika yavangasina kuzvarirwa. Tinoda kunzwa kubva kunemi maexperiences enyu, mutifonerewo, mutitumirewo maWhatsApp, mukwanise kupinda pachirongwa.
And Rungano Tutanganewe, you are a young Zimbabwean living here in the United States. Tell us more about yourself. Of course, we know you are a wonderful, extraordinary intern. You've been doing a great job. But tell us more about yourself.
Well, I moved to America when I was 14 years old, so I was in Form 2, and it was a culture shock, I would say, but zvikuru sase changa chiri chimwe chidano cheupenyu wangu which I was willing to accept. So ndakauya kuzodzidza, ndakatanga ndiri kuhigh school and now ndaku university, saka, you know.
And what are you doing at university level?
I'm studying financial economics. Yes.
Yeah, lapha balaleli silo Rungano liyambona ukhona lapha sihlezi laye yena la uvela kwele Zimbabwe ubuye lapha kwele Melika eleminyaka njengoba echilwe ngu14 ukuthi azofunda khonapha, usehlalile impela lapha kodwa la njengoba libona ukuthi wabuya emncinyane la uzabe sitshela ngokuthi yena lapha wafika njani, useke wathi fahla nje ukuthi hayi kwakungafanani lekhaya, lokho kuthiwa ngesingisi culture shock ukuthi ufice izinto zingahambelani lalokho wakujayele ekhaya.
And those culture shocks, Rungano, talk more about that. How was that experience coming from Zimbabwe, being here? You know, of course, you're coming to Washington, D.C., so that must have been exciting. But, you know, how were the culture shocks for you?
It was very different. At first, just the way the kids interact with teachers, you know, a lot of people talk about that. I would say Kumba, we are more respectful in a way, but here it's more freedom of speech. They get to say whatever they want, whenever they want to say it. So in a way, it was very different. Of course, I didn't like adapt that culture, but yeah, so I managed to fit in and adjust well, so yeah.
Yes, and how was your interaction with youths from other African countries and from Zimbabwe? Did you find many youths in Zimbabwe live here too?
Yes, actually, there's a whole community of young Zimbabweans who live here, and while in school, we're able to interact with other Africans too. So I would say there's a very strong community of young Africans here who network together.
Do you ever talk about Zimbabwe, talk about home, or you feel more American when you're talking with the other youths?
I always talk about home. Home is always home, you know. Kumba is always Kumba, so I would say I have a strong place in my heart for Zimbabwe.
And what language do you use? When you're speaking with the other. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you find that's the trend with other youths who have lived here for a long time?
Yes. For most of them, I would say, especially Wamakoya Vadiki, they try by all means ku dzidzira kana ngwasina udzidza pavakauya, or trying to keep speaking Shona kana Ndebele kana rurimi rwanenge vakadzidzira pavanenge vachikura. So I would say, in a way, they do try by all means to stick to the mother tongue. Yes.
Thank you there, Rungano. Of course, you'll be with us the whole show. Saga, we're very excited for that. And of course, we have a wonderful panel of guests that will be joining us, Standekile and Rungano, on the show today. So we can get things kicked off with one of our guests who is here in Washington, D.C. That is Admonish Deda, who is a student at Howard University here in Washington, D.C. And he's joining us live on Skype. How are you?
Hi, everybody. Hi, Tatenda. Hi, Rungano.
Hi.
Thanks so much for joining us, of course, on the program, Sandikida. You can start off with Data, as they call him.
Yes. So can you tell us what you are doing here?
Okay. So I'm a senior information systems major at Howard University, and that's here in Washington, D.C. And I'm studying information systems, like I just said, but with a particular emphasis on cybersecurity and network engineering.
Yes, and what has your experience been at the campus? Are there some Zimbabweans there? And when you finish, are you thinking of going back home?
Okay, so we have a big African population on campus, but from Southern Africa, it's a very few of us, and from Zimbabwe specifically, I think there's about 3 of us, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, the Zimbabwean population is very underrepresented on campus, but there's a big African population, which kind of helps things.
Yes, and like I said earlier, for the course which you are doing, you feel that if you utilize your skills in Zimbabwe, it will be good for the development of the country too?
Yes. So yeah, you'd asked me like if I had plans to go back home after I finish. Definitely there's no place like home, and I think I speak for most of us young people who are from Zimbabwe if I say that our desire is actually to be in Zimbabwe. We really didn't choose to be here, but yeah, so at the end of the day, when I graduate, when I finish, I really want to go back home and relocate at the right time. But definitely yes, because information technology is changing every day. It's not something that's just constant. So I feel that there's a lot that I could bring to Zimbabwe. We're in America, it's a first world country, and the technology is probably a bit more ahead than what they have in Zimbabwe right now. So I feel there's a lot that I could actually impart and bring back to Zimbabwe if I were to relocate.
Interesting ways there.
That's very interesting. I want to ask Kuti, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced as a foreign student or someone who came from Zimbabwe coming here?
I think the basic challenge faced by anybody who gets to migrate to a foreign country is being independent. And by that I mean that in Zimbabwe you have family, you have a community, you have people who look out for you, who love you and care for you. And in most cases when you relocate abroad, either you have maybe one or two family members who are probably there with you if you're lucky. But in my case, I didn't have any family here. So from being looked after to looking after myself, getting myself a job, getting myself into school, paying my own tuition, and still getting to support family back home, I think that was one of the biggest challenges. But with every challenge, I feel it builds character, you know. So it's a journey that I've been able to enjoy it as it's had its ups and downs. But what you get to appreciate is the lessons that I learned during the way, and you know, you get to appreciate that whole process.
Kochimbotiudza anonzima myths nechirungu that you experience uri kuno kuAmerica.
I think one of the myths that probably people back home have of life here in America is it's probably like what they see on TV, which is pretty much like, you know, everyone has money every day. We're in Miami partying every day. You know, it's not like that at all. People actually work so hard, and that's the part that you don't get to see on TV. That people really work hard to make a living and to put themselves through school and stuff like that. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions or myths that I can actually think of right now.
Yes, siyawezwa amazwi kaMnumzana Deda lapha ufunda khonapha eHoward University, uthi yena wenza eziphathelane le-technology njalo uyathemba ukuthi zizathuthukisa ekhaya njengoba ezahamba ayisebenza khona nxa seqedile izifundo. Njalo uyakhuluma nje ukuthi hayi lapha bona ababaningi abantu abavela kwele Zimbabwe njalo bona laba bakhona labo bayenza okuphathelane lentuthuko, kukanti njalo uthi ekhaya utshona ukhumbula khona ngoba kulandawo efana lekhaya lanxa ulapha. Sikhuluma njalo nje silo munye njalo esiyabe sixoxa laye emoyeni uNosizwe Moyo. uNosizwe Moyo yena uyi-International Education Coordinator khonapha kwele Melika. Siyakwamukela kuhlelo Mamoyo.
Yebo njani?
Hayi siyaphila kakhulu. Ngaqala ngokusichasisela ukuthi umsebenzi wakho lapha eMelika ngowani, kuyini okwenzayo?
Okay. Well, I work in international development as mentioned, and specifically in education. The organization I work in has projects in about 35 different countries, some including African countries. And I'm a project is French. I have French language skills that I acquired from living in Côte d'Ivoire in West Africa. And so I coordinate the training for whether it's teacher trainings or curriculum development, anything education focused. Specifically right now, the countries I'm coordinating are Morocco, Jordan, and Mali.
Yeah, hayi uzwakala uqeqeshile ngempela. Yeah, kodwa khonapho phakathi komsebenzi wakho ungasitshela ukuthi uqhubha njani lo umsebenzi, uyahlangana labantu abanengi nabavela kwamanye amazwe abagoqela ele Zimbabwe njalo ubancedisa ngani?
Ingathi abantu abavela emazweni amaningi ngisebenza nabo. Kodwa most times it's not Africans, which is very interesting. A lot of my professional work since college has been in international development, and specifically in African countries, but we are very much absent in development work that is in Africa. So I can say, mina lasa ngisebenza khona yimi ngedwa African e-ofisini, regardless of abantu abamnyama.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
And Nosizwe, I know you are very well traveled, so if we could have you speak in French, we would too. But chimbotara nechi shona kuti kuita chi kuno kwa America ku Washington DC.
Well, see, it's okay. And in my defense, my family is like when we go to Kaya or Kumusha, we go to Mberengwa, and as you know, that's Midland. So it's very much in Shona, dual language thing. So I'll be mixing and dibbling and dabbling back and forth.
That's okay.
My Ndebele is stronger.
Yeah.
So what was your question again?
I just chingochiudza kuti kuno ku Washington DC kuita chi.
Oh, I'm a project coordinator for different education projects in French-speaking countries. I don't know how to say that in Ghana.
No, it's okay. But, being here in the States, what has been your cultural experience comparing to other places you have been, and obviously comparing it to Zimbabwe?
America is, interestingly, it's home. I was born here. I just wasn't raised here. Mm-hmm. So I came back to America in high school, towards the end of high school. So as much as I am an American, I identify first and foremost as a Zimbabwean. If you've ever met me anywhere, unless there's an explanation needed, if anybody asks me where I'm from, I am from Zimbabwe. And it is very different from home. Like I know Data mentioned, there's like a stronger sense of community and belonging when you're home because there's always someone there, which sometimes can be a nuisance. It's hard to feel a sense of space when you're home. And I'll actually give an example of how I really got to experience that difference in my adult life. A few years back, I actually moved back to Zimbabwe. Mm-hmm. Actually, 2 years ago, I moved back. And one of the things I remember feeling very distinctly was that, okay, when I lived here in America, you go to work, you go to your appointments, and you live your weekly, your day-to-day life. And it's very easy to be isolated. Like, you come home and no one's there. You make your dinner, you eat, and you go to sleep, and you wake up and you do it over and over again. But interestingly, when I was in Zimbabwe, like, there's always someone coming to visit. Like, there were always visitors. Like, every 20 minutes, the doorbell rings. And I remember at some point feeling like, wow, like, on the one hand, this is very nice that, there's always people around, but it's also hard to feel like, man, can I have my space? Can I just, have my sense of, mental clarity? Because there's always so much interaction. So it's a give or take situation as far as comparing being here and being in Zimbabwe, at least in my personal experience.
Mm-hmm. I thank you there. Just to hold on the line, and of course we'll come right back to you.
Okay. Tikunzwa tine mumwe muteereri anonzi Chido Macheka ari kuHarare. Ari kuatenda chikoro kuAfrican University. Chido, tinokuchingamidza muchirongwa. Oh, sorry, ndi Chido Makoni.
Oh, wawandisa na Chido Macho program today.
Yeah, so Tina Chido Makoni, who's on the line, she's attending Towson University here in Maryland. Chido, welcome to the program.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good. Please explain to us and tell us some of the challenges you face or faced as a student who came from Zimbabwe and started going to school here.
I would definitely say in the early days, especially since when I came, I was so young, and being around other American children, it was so strange for them. And I still have friends who I've had since I came here, and they're always like, wow, when you first came, you had like this really, really deep accent, and the kids here, they're not mean, but they tend to tease a lot. So, when they hear a different accent, it's something that, they dwell upon, they talk about it, so that was definitely something I experienced earlier. Nowadays, everybody's like, oh, you don't even have an accent. I wouldn't even know you're from Zimbabwe. And a lot of people have never met someone from Zimbabwe, so it's always like, they're always in awe, like, oh my God, never met anyone from Zimbabwe. There's all these Nigerians and Liberians here, and nobody's ever actually met a Zimbabwean. So I think it's a great experience for me, actually. I like it. I like being different because I feel like I'm always surrounded by a sea of people who are just similar, who are the same person, so it feels good to be able to be like, hey, look, I'm from this place, this is my culture. I like to introduce people to that.
Okay, that's interesting.
Chido,
kutaura achiti pekutanga aizvona zvichimunetsa ne wana wekunoko munoziya kudena wana wadiki, but akazinga ajaira, and she says that she's enjoying it here, so yeah.
Yeah, umlaleli obekhuluma lapho uChido Makoni ufunda khonapha eMelika obuya emncane ubesixoxela lapha ngokuthi yena ifika kwakunjani lapha esithi kakhulu abanengi babe babaza indlela akhuluma ngayo ulimi lwabo. Lizananzelela ukuthi lapha eMelika ulimi olusetshenziswayo alufani kakhulu lolusetshenziswa ilolo silwejayileyo singathi amakhiwa la ama-British, kodwa lona ngolwe-American njalo nxa sokuhlangene lesindebele kumbe isishona babengani abasazwisisi ukuthi sikhulumani. Ngakho-ke uChido uthi kathesi-ke yena usengcono, usekhuluma ngcono, lanxa abangani bakhe lokhu bemkhumbuza ukuthi hayi uyakhumbula ukuthi wawukhuluma njani, kodwa uthi hayi lokhu akuseyinkinga ngoba usesikhupha ngamakhala kathesi esakhonapha. Kukanti nje uthi hayi kodwa uyazigqaja ngokuba ngoweZimbabwe ngoba wehlukile kulabanye abantwana njalo lokhu kakumyangisi.
Chido, thank you so very much. I know Chido mache kari parunari futi, but let's just quickly go back to admonish. Of course, when we talk about Zimbabwe, we can't escape the issue of the situation back home, in particular the political situation. And we know that you yourself are a young Zimbabwean who's involved in the politics of the country. What's your take on what's going on currently within Zimbabwe, and how does that relate to the way that you function day to day living here in the States?
I think the political situation in Zimbabwe, is it okay if I can mix both Shona and
yes, please. Taurako.
Okay, so ndona kunge the political situation iri kumusha affecta munhu wese regardless of kuti uri kupi, uri kuAmerica, uri kuUK, uri kuAustralia, wherever you might be in the world. Right now, since the GNU brought a bit of stability because there was a bit of political stability in the country and things seem to get better. But since the elections, everything has been on a downward spiral, and now you see people are losing their jobs in record numbers because mainly my employers had been forced to retain my workers, thinking that they couldn't, just dismiss those employees without my packages. But after that Supreme Court judgment, we see most employers, including government departments, including parastatals, started sending workers home. That just goes to show just how much the economy is suffering, if there's still an economy to talk about. And unless something drastic is done, or something is really changed in the way that affairs are being run in Zim, it's gonna be the same thing that's happening, where people are just living in numbers to go to neighboring countries in search of better lives. So it's really sad because I feel the leadership is not really concerned, because with everything that has been happening pretty much for the past 15 years in Zimbabwe, there is no excuse why there hasn't been any effort on their part to acknowledge we are failing here and there, and we need help to actually resolve the situation. So it's really sad and unfortunate, but what that also brings to us here abroad is a sense of responsibility, in that we're responsible in making sure that we continue helping our families as much as we can, and we also continue helping with our intellectual ideas and other things we can to help them, Marco Zimbabwe, come up with alternative means of surviving in that harsh economic environment.
So in that light of the economic hardships which you are talking about, what can you say about, what's your comment about the youth in Zimbabwe, especially the way they fail to access, say, scholarships to go to colleges despite their high pass rate and stuff like that? What have you observed, and what do you think is the way forward?
I think on the issue of scholarships, it's something that's very personal to me because I'm here. I'm a permanent resident here, but I failed to access some scholarships just to finish college, and I have to use other means, of course, to try and fund my education. So, if Zimbabwe cannot invest in healthcare, if hospitals are collapsing, if national infrastructure is collapsing, I don't think the government is even concerned about investing in things like scholarships for students to further their education. I think that's one of their, it's at the bottom of their priority list, if I must say. So the only way, I guess, students in Zimbabwe can possibly be helped, with those with academic merit is by making sure that the international community, through like the various NGOs that they work with, they continue supporting those students who are academically gifted. I know there's a couple of organizations that are doing that right now, that bring to America students who are excelling, like in athletics and those different sports. And I know Strive Masiwa has a scholarship program with Morehouse College as well. So if we can get like a partnership between the international community and those individuals from Zimbabwe who are financially able to, so they can come together and identify that talent, that academic talent, and athletic talent that's in Zim, so that they continue to give youth these opportunities to study abroad.
Thank you for your insight. At least Tatenda is admitting that even here it's not all that easy to get scholarships.
It is not.
But what other programs or opportunities for the youths do you observe, or that you think they are very developmental in here in the US, which you wish the Zimbabwean government has, if any?
I think there's and this is the surprising thing. I've seen that there's a lot of Zimbabwean entrepreneurs, youth who've been able to come to the US and showcase or get further development in their careers. I know like the YALI program has brought a lot of African young people to come to the States to gain a bit of experience and learn a bit more, so they can develop their businesses and whatever they are doing. So if the Zimbabwean government at least recognized that they have young people who are talented, and sometimes they don't need government money, they just need resources that enable them to develop whatever they are building. So if the government could take that initiative to actually identify, not wait for Americans to come to Zimbabwe and say, okay, identify 50 people we can send to America for 3 months to go and learn or gain experience. If the government could actually identify their own talent and say, young Zimbabweans, we know we can give you jobs, but let's have a fair, like science fairs and stuff like that. Let's see what you can come up with, invent something. And then they channel those few resources that they have into developing that. I feel that Zimbabwe might not be as dependent as it is on other countries for such programs. They might be able to develop that stuff by themselves.
Thank you there, Admonish. Just hold on the line. Of course, I know Nosizwe is on the line. I'm sure she has input on that aspect. But of course, it is the time now where we say goodbye to our radio listeners as we transition over to our live stream on the internet. And of course, we are streaming on www.voazimbabwe.com. Sandekile, where else can they go?
Laba abasilalele emsakazweni we-radio sesithutha kathesi sesiya emsakazweni webulenjini we-internet, lakho lingahamba lathi lisilandele siqhubeke ngohlelo lwethu okweminye imizuzu elandelayo.
Vatereriwe vatakusiya vatereriwe pa radio munogona kutibata pa voashona.com.
Stay tuned. good evening again for those of you who have been joining us, and for those of you who have just tuned in, you are watching Studio 7 Live Talk, the connection from the Voice of America here in Washington, D.C. And we are discussing and talking about young Zimbabweans living in the diaspora. They're talking about their challenges, what they faced, and how they can make the impact back home in Zimbabwe.
Kulabo abasanda ukusixhuma sikuhlelo lwe The Connection lapho esikhuluma ngabatsha abahlala kwamanye amazwe lokuthi baphila njani, basiphilisa njani kulawo mazwe. Sikhangela amazwe amaningi agoqela la khonapha kweMelika, sikhangela eLengilandi, sikhangela eSouth Africa, lawo wonke nje amazwe omhlaba lapho izizalwane zeZimbabwe esezasabalala zagcwala khona ikakhulu ngokuswela imisebenzi lokunye okuchiyechiyeneyo.
Manerano muchirongwa che The Connection tinechange tichitaura nevana vekuZimbabwe vechidiki vari kugara kunze kwenyika tichinzwa nezve upenyu hwavo, kudzidza kwavo nemabasa vari kuita kunze kwenyika.
Yes, and on the line we have Nosizwe Moyo. She's an international education coordinator. Nosizwe, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Yes, and you must have heard the views of the Howard University student, Mr. Deda there. He was telling us, he was sharing his views on what could be done by the Zimbabwean government to uplift the lives of the youth. What's your comment about what he has just said, and what's your input?
I definitely, I guess I can start by agreeing with what he said as far as the need for more opportunities for youth, and even, to send them out of the country, or for NGOs to continue to provide opportunities where students can get scholarships, or some kinds of like incubator projects where they come here and they develop their skills so they can come back and do something in Zimbabwe. And what I found when I was in Zimbabwe myself was that as much as, there's this idea that, opportunities are overseas, there are a lot of highly educated Zimbabweans who were educated in university in Zimbabwe who don't necessarily want to leave the country if they don't have to. And I think it's really important to also give, therefore, like a shout out or recognition to all the entrepreneurs who have managed to do something in Zimbabwe without leaving. There's a lot of people who I met who are doing waste management projects. I mean, very detailed and high-level work that I was very impressed by, who are in Zimbabwe and never left. And so it's one of those things where I don't like suggestions or ideas for Zimbabwe's youth that, promote them leaving the country, because if everybody leaves, then there's nobody in Zimbabwe left. And even when I moved back to Zimbabwe, I remember feeling a very strong sense of emptiness in a lot of the cities. Having lived my younger years, in the 90s, that was like the golden era in Zim. And there was always a strong sense of the city being alive and people working and people being active. But now, when I went back, it really felt like there's a lot of old people, like our grandparents' generations, and then a lot of our parents left the country. So there's this big void where we're like, as youth, we're waiting for things to happen, which is fair. We should wait for things to happen. But I also felt like we're the only people who can make things happen in Zimbabwe, and we need to do those things without leaving. And I think that's really what the Zimbabwean government needs to focus on, because there's a big generation gap where, as much as youth have all these ideas that, use technology and are suited for the life that we live now, there's definitely a disconnect because the government is not doing things that are helping, these entrepreneurs have the environment they need. And maybe that's not even because they don't want to, it's just because they don't have the capacity to understand the needs of our generation.
Ayikuyezwakala lapho tatena lorungano bavumelana uNosizwe Moyo lo mnumzana athi monisha ukuthi ngempela kunenge okufanele kwenziwe eZimbabwe okungancediswa abatsha njalo banika imbono echiyeneyo ukuthi kungenziwani njoba limzwile umnumzana Dede sithena ngabe kulenhlanganiso eziningi ezincedisa abantu ikakhulu abasakhulayo ngemali yokufunda njalo silimzwile lapho mamoyo la uthi yena kuningi okufanele kwenziwe ukuze kuthuthukiswe umnotho welizwe abantu bebe lempilo engcono eZimbabwe.
And also I'd like to point out what Nosize was talking about. Chitaura kuti, you know, she doesn't see the point of Zimbabweans achiya kuzodzidza kuno kwasingadzokere nedzidzo ravadzidza kunobatsira nyika yavo. We were at the presidential summit for Yali just 2 weeks ago, and President Obama vakataura the same thing, kuti, you know, you have all these opportunities, why waste them and stay kunoko pane kuti mudzokere kumba munobatsira nyika dzenyu kuti dzidevelop, you know, nezvamunenge madzidza kunoko. So that's a really good point right there.
And tina Chido Macheka ngachimira pa line saka chimbotaura na Chido Macheka ari kuZimbabwe.
Okay, tina mutevere Chido Macheka. She's a student at African University. Chido, tinokuchingamidza muchirongwa. How are you?
Thank you. I'm fine, thank you.
So how's Mutare and African University? How are you liking the environment there?
The environment is quite okay. So far, so good. I like it, yeah.
Okay, that's good. What was the hardest part of adjusting to university?
Adjusting for me was a bit different and difficult. Looking at that, I came from a different school. My school was quite advanced, as in it was a private school. So coming here, I had to mix with a lot of people from different backgrounds. So it was quite difficult, but yeah, I got to understand and then adjust to the environment.
Okay, that's good. Tinonzwa kuti kune vana vechikoro vakawanda sterek who finish university in Zimbabwe, but the problem is they can't find jobs kana vapedza. Are you concerned about that, and what do you think should be done about it?
I'm actually concerned about that, yes, because there's too many people who are in university and they're getting really good degrees, however, after not have anywhere to go, because people are being, as we heard before earlier in the show, that people are being retrenched from their jobs. Some were, you know, so it's a bit difficult then. So what are those people going to do? There are less jobs, yet more people in school. What are we going to do with this addiction? It's like there's no future for us, there's no hope. There's no job creation in this economic situation. So that is where the problem is. That is where my concern is.
Okay.
Chido, I just want to ask if you've ever, you yourself, thought about going out into the diaspora. Have you been afforded that opportunity? Have you thought about it? And if you were, would you take that opportunity?
Actually, I thought of that opportunity because it's really difficult in such an economic situation that's really down like this to start. For my sake, I'm studying psychology, and it's not really recognized here. People are not at that stage where they value psychology, and otherwise, if you're doing something like human resources management, which is important in other people's businesses, but I would want to take the health side. So, you know, here you won't necessarily get a job, a proper job, or let's say a job where there's no one, you understand? So obviously opportunities are there outside of Zimbabwe. I would love to, however, I am the future for tomorrow. So I have to also create that opportunity for the future generations to come. So I guess any time will tell.
Sibongeke lapho uChido Macheka inobe sitshela ngokuthi yena khona ngale wenzani student lapha afunda khona uyi student Africa University lokuthi la kuyikuthi engalizuza ithuba lokubuya lapha kungaba ubuhle.
And of course, Tambonzwa from Admonish kuti Howard Panema Zimbabweans, I think anziwa wiri kanoti watatu, and ironically the other Zimbabwean is there. So we'd like to welcome you on the program. I think it's Tapia Musona who's with you, Admonish.
Yes, that's a
How are you, Tapia?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on the show.
Chimbochiuza kuti ku Howard ukustudy achi, and how's your experience kuno ku America? How's that been for you?
Okay. I'm studying finance and economics for Howard. I'm getting into my senior year. It's a great experience. Thank God for blessing me with this opportunity. My experience in America in general, I think it's been a trajectory. I think, I started at the bottom. Definitely started out, working in warehouses, shoveling snow, moving boxes, But, it's just, you definitely teaches you how to be humble and definitely just hard work ethic. That's part of our Zimbabwean blood, So I think, it's been a great experience and never settling. So I'm always working hard to always achieve the best.
That's very good. Just to point out, there's a quote from CNN. Yatangatawana yange chitaura yangeka nyorwana anonzi Amina Kajunja, and she was saying that no matter how they arrived or they adopted to the country that they are now, Diaspora bring a distinct perspective all the time because they have experienced both worlds. So, we have that Zimbabwean blood, but at the same time, we are trying to fit into the culture that's
Yeah, Tapia Chimbotara ipapo, like the issue ye kwa assimilate. Ukazviona say kana kubapa wakasvika ku America kuti were you forced to assimilate to the American system, kana you kept your Zimbabwean roots and just followed suit in what you felt was best for you?
I think, it definitely goes in a personal preference. For me personally, I always keep to my Zimbabwean values. It's definitely helped me a lot through my career. But also, you also have to adjust to the climate. I know one of the things that I kind of had to learn to let go. I know Zimbabwe, and when you come over here, it's a sign of respect that you're engaged in the conversation when you look people straight in the eye and you don't feel like so that was one of the things that you kind of have to just let go of respect but it shows good to be weak and I was engaged.
That's true. I've met some other young Africans who have said that when they're engaging in networking situations, even my business events, they're usually told, look someone in the eye, shake someone's hand, and for them they find it very complicated because a lot of times back home, you don't look at someone in the eye. It's a sign of disrespect. But then people will say to you like, this person is kind of weak. They don't know how to assert themselves, as a person. So it's a very interesting thing there. One of the nuances that you have to deal with being in a different country than your own.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Siyawuzwa ukukhulunywa nguTapia laphana ukuthi la uthi hayi lapha eMelika la nxa yena igcina khona ukhiyana ukuba ngumZimbabwean wakhe kodwa la kufanele ayenze okwenziwa ngabanye ukwenzela ukuthi la lapha lakho ahlalisane kuhle labanye kodwa hayi kakhohlwanga ukuthi yena ungubani. Njalo futhi tatenda silomlaleli lapha ecingweni umnumzana Jacob Lawrence ofuna esezwishabani. Linjani mnumzana?
Yebo, hayi ngiyaphila linjani?
Hayi siyaphila kunjani khona ngapho ezwishabani?
Hayi ezwishabani siyaphila nje.
Ungasinika mbono bani kuhlelo lolo esikulo kuyini ongasichathekela khona?
Ya mina ngake nga-experience khona lokho ngake ngasebenza ngise-South Africa okwenyanga ezintathu kona lomnyaka njengomyouth ngabona ukuthi ukusebenza uhlala kwelinye ilizwe elingasolakho into ebuhlungu kakhulu ngoba uyabe ulimited in everything uyabuyenza ngabona ukuthi kungcono ukuthi uhlale uselizweni lakho kunokuhlala uselizweni elingasilo lakho ngoba firstly masikhangela ama-Zimbabwean youth akhona le-South Africa abanye bakhona ikakhulu amantombazana bagcina sebesiba ngama-prostitutes ngoba imisebenzi yangikhona abayitholi. Siphinde sikhangele futhi lapho ezindlini abahlala kuzo bahlala kabuhlungu bakhona ukuhlala endlini iroom eyi-1 bebaningi bezama ukushare that same room. Mase sikhangela ama-youth abafana yibona abana abagcina sebesenza imisebenzi engayisiyo, imisebenzi yokusela, imisebenzi yobugebengu. Vele ukuhlala elizweni elingayisilo lakho yinto ebuhlungu kakhulu and imisebenzi mali itholile imisebenzi yakho elithola imisebenzi ebuhlungu and labe lihlukunyezwa futhi imisebenzi leyo lithola imali yabikhona but yabincane ayeneli ukuthi liyenze into eliyabe lifuna. Yikho ama-youth amaningi agcine ehlala khona le-South Africa, aphelele khona le-South Africa ehlele kuphela ngekhaya ngoba imali abayitholayo ayeneli. So ukuhlala elizweni elingayisilo lakho ayisiyo into emnandi, kubuhlungu ngoba I experienced that. I was in South Africa for the past 3 months.
Yeah, kuyezwakala ungama khona pho Mbijana ecingweni. What she's saying here is very interesting. Tatenda, we've been talking about the youths here overseas.
Yeah.
You know, when we are to Zimbabwe now, we are getting closer to home. Actually, he says he has been in South Africa for 3 months. He has worked there, and what he has seen there is not what he would recommend for anyone. He says, for example, there are no jobs, and you find that people, you know, the living arrangements are very crowded. People have to share, you know, small space, and you find that because of lack of jobs, women end up engaging in prostitution, especially the youths, you see. So that's that kind of situation is not very commendable. And Lawrence, ungathanda njalo ukuthi usithi fahla ngolimi lwesishona khona okwasitshele khona ngolimi lesindebele.
Okay, azwakana kai. Okay, ezona kanje ithawura ngezokuthi kugara munyika isiri yakho chinji norwadza. Ndakamboshanda ku South Africa kwema months 3 anari kaya. Ndaka experience zvinhu zvakawanda. Ndaisada kudzoka muno muZimbabwe but ndakagara muSouth Africa zvandakaona ndezvokuti mayouth kunyanya vechidiki vasikana vanopedzisira vakuita zvinhu zvechi prostitution ikoko nekuti mabasa acho hapana, ende vanenge vawana mabasa acho mari iripo but ishoma, saka vanozopedzisira vaita zveprostitution. Ndosaka vamwe vacho vachigara ikoko kuSouth Africa vachitadza kudzoka kumba, kuchizoti vechidiki vakomana ndivo vai vanoti kana vashaya mabasa vakutanga kuita mabasa erima, semabasa ekuita robhari nezvimwe zvakada kudaro. Saka kugara munyika isiri yako chinhu chinorwadza zvikuru. Even magariro avo vanogara vakawanda murumu imwe chete, zvinozokonzeresa zvirwere zvakawandisa. Saka ini nangu handifarire kugara munyika isiri yangu, zviri nani kuya kuzotambura munyika yedu.
Siyabonga umbono wakho Mnumzana Lawrence, hayi ubelela ngayilili.
Okay, siyabonga silani futhi.
Yeah, of course, very touching there indeed. And like we spoke about earlier, you know, there are different experiences depending on where you are, depending on if you're in South Africa, if you're in, you know, the UK, if you're in Asia, if you're here in America. But the South African experience, I think, is the most daunting in the sense that it's a high influx of Zimbabweans who are in there day to day, in and out. And as Jacob Lawrence was saying there, that, you know, of course, there are so many challenges, no jobs, you're already coming to a stretched economy, and the young people are faced or left to rely on some unruly or some, you know, ways of living that they normally would not want to partake in, unfortunately.
Yes, and we realize that out of all those an estimated 3 million of Zimbabweans living in South Africa. Most of them are likely to be the youths.
Yeah, of course.
And some of them are failing to formalize their papers, like these permits, the work visas, and so forth.
So, of course, I think Standekile and Rungano, we have two callers on the line. The first one is Emmanuel Ndlovu, who is in Nigeria, currently a Zimbabwean living in Nigeria. And he was here last year in the United States as part of the Mandela Washington Fellowship program for 2014, and currently is in Nigeria working for Mercy Corp. So, Emmanuel, we'll come to you. If you can just give us your take as someone who has experienced the diaspora. How have you been faring, and how do you see it as a Zimbabwean who has had the chance to travel around and experience other places?
Okay, greetings. Thank you so much for the platform and for inviting me to share my views. Definitely, I think, being away from home on its own, despite the opportunities, that are presented, it is a challenge. Like where I am right now, I rarely come across Zimbabweans. That's why I know of only 3 Zimbabweans here in Abuja, and we see each other, rarely, unless maybe I break out of my ordinary schedule to go and visit them. We don't usually meet each other. So it is indeed a challenge, but it's also an opportunity in another sense, because I'm here to internationalize my experience in issues to do with advocacy. For example, here I'm working on the farmer pastoralist conflict in Nigeria's Middle Belt region, which is a new field altogether. It's a new dimension of conflict and society that we do not have home. So for me, it's a new exposure, new lessons, but being away from home and also, the pressure back home is also necessitated that I take up this opportunity, because there are not so many opportunities back home. So it is an opportunity and an added advantage, and I hope that maybe after this I'll get a better position to get maybe more decent things back home or even elsewhere.
Kuyezwakala Mnumzana Ndlovu, kodwa ungasitshela ukuthi kunjani khona ngapho eNigeria, uhlezi njani? Sikhangela ukuthi ulimi olukhulunywayo lwehlukile, kulula yini ukusebenza khona ngapho eNigeria, njalo uthi fahla nje isifinqo salokho ukukhulumela ngesingisi?
Ora nyabonga dadewethu. Oqala ipidgin, kuthiwa ipidgin English ekhulunywa lapha isikhiwa lesesiqhamukile. Mina sibile iqiniso kanye isikwanisi njalo kuyangisinda sibili ukuthi ngiqamule isikhiwa ngendlela engafundiswa ngakhona. Ukuthi uqamule isikhiwa kwakuyinto echayisayo nesikhathi esikhula, but lapha ilanguage enormal. Ukuthi ungakhuluma like proper English, omunye ingxenye ofana translate into isikhiwa esiqamule ukuthi abantu bazezwe.
Lapho sikhuluma ngabantu abahlale abantu nje ezitaladini kumbe lema-ofisini kuyatholakala?
Of course ema-ofisini kuba ngcono, but phandle ezitaladini yilulimi olukhulunywa. And west mina lapho engisebenza khona ngisebenza lama-communities abantu ingcengese labanye abangazi lokubamba ipheni umuntu engakwanisi, so uyakufanda ukhulume ngelanguage abayisebenzayo. And akusonto elula sibili.
Kodwa siyabona. Uxolo, qhubeka.
Okay, bengisithi okunye ukudla lapha yonke into yangikhona lebilebile kuthiwa ipepe. Sibile sendibhalele.
Kuthiwa kuyini ibilebile lakhona? Sicela usitshele njalo ibizo.
Bathi ipepe lapha. Manje akuba nzima le culture, ngoba uyabona ukuthi asithi khona phana e-ofisini maybe kuthisa umuntu ongumama udingelela ingxenye ukholo olutshiyeneyo like ama-Muslim. Awufanelanga umkhawulo kumbe libambane izandla. Ngenye into enjani ebanzima nakana to adjust ubone usuzijayelele nje ngoba ukuthi wonke umuntu uyazingelelana ukhawulane kumbe lihagane. Ngapha you have to be extra careful kumbe uthini yenza umhlangano uqala ngokukhuleka lapha kakukho ngoba abantu balenkolo ezithiyene. So ku-adjusta khona ukhana yakusonto engathi kula.
Kodwa siyabona ngemvunulo ukuthi hayi sonjengabo. Ungathi uyangenelana layo yini impilo yabo kakhulu? Ngisitsho ukuthi kulabanye njalo yini abavela kwele Zimbabwe labo abazamayo ukuthi behlalisane kuhle labe Nigeria, njoba lelo sibona ngani lilizwe lingandanga ukuzwa ukuthi sizwe kuthiwa kule zizalwane zeZimbabwe nxa sesiqhathanisa lamazwe njengabo South Africa.
Qiniso dadewethu, mina kwanthatha I think a month and a half ukuze ngithole inhlanganelo ngonye labantu baseZimbabwe. And I know of 3 Zimbabweans abalapha eAbuja abasebenza ku-company eyi-1 la food outlet. Yibo abantu engathi from time to time ngiyasuthi ngibavakashele. Xa sengikhumbula sakithi siyexoxa ngento zekhaya, but phandle lapha kawuhlangani lapha sengihambe endaweni eziningi abantu bewuthela ukuthi ingxenye the first person to meet ovela ingxenye ngathi kuhlangothi lwesadaki. Otherwise abantu lapha nje se-homogeneous society alutshwana nje ukuthi uhlangane lomuntu ongasuka lapha.
Hayi ukuzwakele ungathi fahla nje ngamafitshane ngabona bengathanda ukuzwa ngesingisi ukuthi uthini ngebilebile leli la ngolimi lolo lukhulunywa ukuthiwa iPidgin la lokuthi akumelanga uxhawula abesifazana ngamafitshane kakhulu.
I think one of the greatest challenges is adjusting to this new culture. You know, we take for granted home a lot of things, maybe that more than 90% of us are Christians. But here, you know, it's a deeply, deeply divided society where maybe political issues are sometimes violently and rigorously contested along regional, ethnic, and religious identities. So you have to be careful in how you greet people, in how you approach, you know, new societies, and how you approach just things that you take for granted, like maybe praying before an event, or hugging or greeting, and even your dressing. At times you get to scenarios where you need to, you know, being different from others might actually make you more vulnerable. So you have to try and look more like, you know, the ordinary person in that society for you to be acceptable and for them to feel that you are not a threat. Yeah. So, and also the food, you know, a lot of people here, I think it's been a serious challenge for me. Like today I didn't go to work. I wasn't feeling
Emmanuel. Let me just have you just hold on really quickly. Apologies for that. We have a caller who's also on the line. Just want to get them in as time is running out. Rungano, go ahead.
Tinemu Tereri Tariro Kandemiri, who's right next door in Maryland. Tariro, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be on the show with you all.
We're happy to have you. So we're discussing the experiences that young Zimbabweans are facing, or challenges, or that they're facing here in different countries that they're living in. Can you tell us your experience in school and work?
Sure. I think I've had, for the most part, a very positive experience, but you know, I came to America when I was 7, turning 8, and so, you know, that was a tough time. That was a tough challenge for me, having to adjust, because all my friends, you know, they're to crash with the same people. I went to preschool with the same people and started grade school with the same people, and so coming to America, starting to take my uniform, you know, different classes. There were all these different things going on. McDonald's, this, that, all these different things, and you know, cultural things are different too. People watch That's So Raven, and in Diona, you know, my shows that they're watching my Zimbabwean comedies and things like that. So I learned from a young age that at times you would feel very pressured to have to kind of conform to the society of America, and at times I felt like I really had to be more American so I could fit in. But the older I've gotten, and especially going off to college, you know, I've learned that I had to take pride in who I was. And instead of trying to back away from, I don't want to be, you know, known as the Zimbabwean girl, I've taken pride in saying, you know what, I'm different, and that's okay, but this is what makes me better, and this is what I can bring to the table from my culture.
Tariro, thank you so much. Sorry, we're running out of time. We want to thank you, and we'll head over to Nosizwe. Just your last word in about 20 seconds, what you want and what you hope for Zimbabwe moving forward as someone who's living in the diaspora.
I think in closing out, what I would like for Zimbabwe is for Zimbabwe to grow in whatever direction, you know, where we are leads us to. And because there is such a big youth population, I'm looking forward to a Zimbabwe where the youth are working and employed, because ultimately a working youth means a working country. And that would also mean an opportunity for me to go back. So that would be ideal for me.
Thank you. And gentlemen, over Skype, just 10 seconds each, your last word.
Personally, what I hope for Zimbabwe, I expect actually more Zimbabweans to move back home. I think the brain drain is not sustainable, and I think the change that is needed comes from us, and we definitely need to go back and help everyone back there.
Data, 5 seconds.
Okay, thank you so much for having us on the show. I think Tapia is my
And of course, we'll say thank you to our guests, Admonish Deda and Tapia Musona over there at Howard University, Nosizwe Moyo, International Education Coordinator in Washington, D.C. We also had Emmanuel Ndlovu, a Yali alumni in Nigeria currently, also from Zimbabwe, and of course, Sandekile Mhlanga and Rungano Kaiyo. Thank you much for joining me today on the Youth Forum.
Yes, bongile kubalani balaleli.
I'm Rungano Kaiyo.